Rest of our program all about the law, that with our panel of attorneys. But first, we're going to take a look at the new wrinkles in the Russia probe. Some contentious hearings on the Hill today, in fact, on the subject. Now, the president's lawyer, he wants a second independent counsel appointed to investigate how the FBI is investigating the case and if they can be fair brokers. They say one of the agents is tainted because he has criticized President Trump. We'll take a look at that and a whole lot more after this.
In testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, you said that you would only fire Special Counsel Mueller for good cause, and that you had not seen any yet. Several months have passed since then. Have you seen good cause to fire Special Counsel Mueller?
No.
Thank you. If you were ordered today to fire Mr. Mueller, what would you do?
As I've explained previously, I would follow the regulation. If there were good cause, I would act. If there were no good cause, I would not.
That's Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. That he obviously the top guy over at the Justice Department, talking about the Russia probe since Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself. Now, you just heard his feelings about Bob Mueller during a hearing at the House Judicial Committee earlier today. Rosenstein, he was also asked about Peter Strzok. He, the FBI agent, dismissed from the case this past July after it was discovered he was texting negative things about Trump with another agent. He called Trump, among other things, an idiot. He also texted, "I do so hope his disorganization comes to bite him hard in November." And on Election Day, when he thought Trump might win, he texted, "OMG, this is terrifying." Now here's more from the hearing.
The Department of Justice investigations must not be tainted by individuals imposing their own political prejudices.
My question to you is, how with a straight face can you say that this group of Democrat partisans are unbiased and will give President Trump a fair shake?
I've discussed this with Director Mueller, and he and I collectively have a lot of experience managing offices in the Department of Justice. We recognize we have employees with political opinions, and it's our responsibility to make sure those opinions do not influence their actions. Pardon me. And so I believe that Director Mueller understands that and that he is running that office appropriately.
Let's bring in our legal panel right now to help hash this out. Jimmy Kousouros, a criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, sits on the board of directors at the New York City Criminal Bar Association, also frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens in New York. Also, Mimi Rocco, who now is a professor at Pace Law, a former federal prosecutor herself. Richard Brodsky, an attorney, former Democratic New York Assemblyman, and also a professor at NYU. All right. Mimi, explain where the line is. First, what an agent can or can't say on their private time, let alone when they're on the clock, and how can that or can't that disqualify them from the course of an investigation?
Well, an agent or a prosecutor, for that matter, can't engage in political activities while they're working or using their, their work phones and computers. I actually don't know the answer to whether or not they were using their work phones in this case. I don't know. So that would make a difference in terms of whether this was prohibited behavior. But the attacks that are going on here against the FBI agents and, frankly, against the prosecutors, when today at the hearing, when they were listing off, the political contributions that the various prosecutors had made, I mean, that is permissive. You are allowed to make political contributions on your own time with your own money, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the idea that that kind of activity should somehow disqualify a prosecutor or an agent from working on certain investigations, I think is a very slippery and dangerous slope.
So just so the audience is clear, when you join the U.S. Prosecutor's Office or the Federal Bureau of Investigations, you don't cease your rights as a citizen.
Absolutely
it just can't impact your work. But then the question, Richard, becomes what is opinion on your own and when does it cloud your performance? This guy was terminated by Mueller,
right,
okay? So my question is, can you say the president's an idiot and then say that doesn't impact my performance?
There may be a legal standard here, as you've just heard, with respect to what's permissible or illegal activity. That's not the standard that ought to be applied here. What would you say if Hillary Clinton was being investigated by somebody who said the Clintons are thieves? You don't have a constitutional First Amendment right to investigate, to work on a particular case. So whatever his rights are as an employee, the decision to remove him from being part of the investigative team was the correct decision, and it's not acceptable behavior.
Jimmy, you've been on both sides of this as working at a DA's office and obviously as a criminal defense attorney. When you're defending a client, do you ever try and find out if there's bias against your client or your client's organization on the part of the prosecutors?
Sure. There are some instances where I've represented individuals who, mostly in street crimes, they have relationships with some of the officers, detectives. There's words been exchanged between them. And if there's something there, we will try to investigate it and make something of it at a trial. But, I just think this is all noise. I really do. Nobody can say that Mueller is not doing his job. Nobody can say that he is tainted in any way. I think that he did, I suppose, make the right decision, but more for optical purposes and to make sure that everything is fair. People have a right to express their opinions regardless of where they work. I know prosecutors, defense attorneys, we express our opinions about defendants, about prosecutors, about defense attorneys, about agents, about a case, about the evidence.
About someone you're investigating? And you say he's an idiot, or that the country's in danger, and then you're going to go and investigate him for...
I'm not saying that doesn't look bad, but you want to know something? Do you really think that this investigative team or any other investigative team, Mimi, you with the U.S. Attorney's Office, you have agents investigating something bad, a group or something. They're not going to talk amongst themselves and make comments. There might be people on his team going, this is all for nothing, or why are we doing this, or why are we wasting our time? They express their opinions.
Can I jump in for a second? I think the answer to the question of, how can you expect someone to fairly investigate a target when they've called him an idiot, or, for example, is that these are professionals. I think Mueller went out and he got a team of people who have been lifelong career prosecutors. This is their job. I do think that we should and could have faith in them, that they can put their personal beliefs aside to follow the evidence. And prosecutors like to make cases. They don't care who the case is against, meaning they don't care whether they're a Democrat or Republican. When I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, we made cases against both Democrats and Republicans. It didn't matter who the U.S. Attorney was appointed by. But just to be clear to the audience,
if Mueller had said this comment, okay, and it was, that he had texted to somebody, that's a different case, right?
But that's not what we're talking about.
I know it's not. But what I'm trying to make my point is, how many agents, for example, would work on a case the size of the Russia investigation? Hundreds, I would assume, right? Let alone the 16, 17 prosecutors that are already taking different facets of it. I don't think there's anywhere in a country where you can get 200 people that are going to agree on everything. What I'm trying to get at is, in terms of a legitimacy of a case, they were labeling today when they went back and forth. Some people gave $30,000 to Republican campaigns over the course of their careers. I guess the public just wants to know, maybe what's the standard we should apply here, more than just generally, one second, Richard, more than just generally, they're professionals.
This is ahistoric. The FBI was run by a man named J. Edgar Hoover, who let his personal biases and opinions affect his investigations for 30 years. I love prosecutors, don't get me wrong. But let's have some historic appreciation of the enormous power they have and the potential for and the history of abuse of that power.
Okay, so take it to the next step. It doesn't look good. Everybody agrees. Mueller made the right call, I think, that nobody's debating. He cut the guy loose in July. What more should have been done, and does it disqualify him?
I didn't say anything more should have been done.
Mimi, did you not bring cases even though you thought somebody was terrible? Of course not. If you didn't have the evidence and it didn't arise to an indictable offense, as much as you, your agents, everybody looking at it might have thought the guy was horrible and incorrigible.
Right. It's not about your personal opinions. And I think to answer the question you asked, you can have your personal beliefs. It can't infect the work that you do. You can't allow that to control the decisions you make as a prosecutor. And in my experience, prosecutors and agents are able to separate those two things. If we start having a litmus test, for example, Secret Service agents, they guard the president. Do we ask them whether they like the president, whether they agree, whether they think he should have won? No, we're not going to go down that road in America. And I think this idea,
it's been further complicated with social media because somebody now opines, and now there's a digital record of it. And if an agent did say, God is the president, he'd immediately be removed from the detail. But before I run out of time, the discussion today just wasn't on the fitness of Mueller and team to do the investigation. It's the second step, which is, do we need a parallel counsel appointed here? I would assume you can't. There's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? And this is only going to lead to trouble.
To do well, and right. Yeah. I mean, the counsel can only investigate if there's a crime. Can be appointed if there's a crime, and there's no. I mean, even if you assume that the agent used bad judgment, or you don't think that the Mueller team is composed of the right balance of people. There's no allegation that there was a crime committed here by the FBI agent that was removed.
Well, that's not the way they want the special prosecutor. They want the special prosecutor to look at the Clinton stuff. And there are allegations that there were crimes that went unpunished. Now,
there's an IG investigation for that. The FBI is investigating how that was handled, and
they want somebody to be looking over who they have investigating because they don't like who's investigating. That's what they want. So they want somebody to look over the person who's looking over it.
They liked him until he started getting close to Trump, and now all of a sudden they don't like him.
Do you ever run into anything like this in Albany?
Well, you had investigative bodies like the various inspector generals and the Moreland commissions, which were complete creatures of less than neutral investigative. How do I say this?
I get you.
Survive.
Yes. I know where you're going.
So the notion that there are prosecutors in there and they'll be independent, God bless you. God bless you. No. That's not the standard for people who can indict.
But to be clear,
people.
You're saying there's not a better alternative than what we've got going right now.
I think Mueller's doing fine. I think Mueller's not the issue, and I think Mueller acted appropriately when he did what he did. But the notion was, the prosecutors, we separate our opinions from our actions.
But
is a little
what's the
hysterical.
alternative? You're going to ask them their opinions before they get assigned to a case?
No. When someone volunteers and steps into the spotlight and says what they said, and it becomes public, got to be held accountable.
Well, not accountable. You can be discharged, but the notion that expressing your opinion somehow precipitates accountability. I mean, the guy lost his job, and I understand that, but the notion that
if the guy had said, "I hate Protestants," or "I hate black people," would that have been grounds for disqualification? That's his opinion.
If the guy said, I don't think... What if the guy said, I think Trump's an idiot, but I think this investigation is nonsense? What do you do with that? What do you do with that?
I don't know because that's not what happened.
No, but,
he only said half of it.
But that's why we need to accept that everybody has an opinion, and we have to assume what we know has gone on for the vast majority of times. They separate them.
I am shocked. It never ceases to amaze me that the people you would think that would know the most not to go on social media and opine about these things
come to my office and listen to Wiretap.
My God, in your legal profession, don't you guys know?
He was texting private. I mean, again,
so what? Elliot Spitzer.
You can't text with your girlfriend,
don't
spouse.
Talk when you can nod. Don't nod when you can wink. Don't wink when you can smile. I mean,
there is a judgment issue. I agree, but it's. I mean, I do think it would be a slightly different conversation if he was posting it on Facebook, but he wasn't. He was texting it privately. And remember, the attacks that are going on here, what we saw today, a lot of time was spent on the political contributions by the prosecutor
today. I'm just wondering, though, where the line starts and stops. All right, coming up next, some of President Trump's picks here for federal judge shits are so controversial, even unqualified. You have Republicans, including the head of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, saying, give me somebody else. We're going to take a look at the history and how important it is to get these picks right. I know everybody focuses on Supreme Court appointments. These are federal judgeships. We're going to talk about that straight ahead. Now, on this program, we've spoken quite a bit about the president's controversial and even sometimes unqualified picks for certain agencies. Now, there are questions when it comes to some federal judge appointments, and it's not just me raising questions here. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, he heads the Judiciary Committee. He's urging the president to retract 2 of his picks. I mean, highly unusual. In fact, I can't even remember the last time this has happened when it comes from someone from your own party to their president. One of them withdrew himself from consideration just a couple hours ago. That's Brett Talley. Now, he's only 36. He's never tried a case. Plus, he failed to disclose that his wife works in the White House counsel's office. American Bar Association rated him unqualified. So Talley is out. But it makes you wonder why he was even picked in the first place. But this man, Jeff Mateer, he's still in the mix. Now, the president, he picked him for the Texas bench, and he's got quite a history. Here are some of his greatest hits from the assistant AG of Texas. He said, same-sex marriage would lead to polygamy and bestiality. He supports gay conversion therapy. And he said, transgender children are all part of, quote, Satan's plan. Then there's this man, Leonard Stephen Gratz. He has called the Roe v. Wade abortion ruling moral bankruptcy. He said same-sex marriage poses, quote, grave danger to the country. Also, the American Bar Association rated him as, quote, not qualified. But apparently, he's qualified for the 8th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals because the Senate just approved him today by a party line vote. And again, Mimi, I start with you, which is for people who say, okay, well, you got the U.S. Supreme Court and then everything else kind of falls by the wayside. These are lifetime appointments. These are arguably in some ways just as important in terms of gateways to the Supreme Court. It can't be minimized, the significance of these jobs.
Yeah, and not just as gateways to the Supreme Court. I mean, such a small number of cases actually ever make it to the Supreme Court. So it's the district court and the federal appeals courts where law is really made. The law that impacts, how criminal prosecutions are done, how, immigration laws are enforced, civil rights laws. So, I mean, these will have the biggest impact on things that people are going to feel every day, these appointments, and they are lifetime appointments.
Rich, these are the most powerful people in this country. I'm not kidding. I cannot underemphasize the importance of district court judges and Court of Appeals judges. Mimi's right. The Supreme Court hears a mere fraction of cases. And yes, their rulings are incredibly important.
And I hear, by the way, just when we pull the curtain back, I hear you guys talk all the time in the green room, you and some of the guys, about some of these judges and how it's night and day depending on who you're before. On what they bring to the table or not. So obviously there's a human element to this. People can come from different presidential appointments, from different parties and all the rest. But I never heard you guys talk about somebody being completely unqualified to sit behind the bench. Some of these folks, I mean, if you've never tried a case before, that you'd be considered to be a federal judge?
It's so scary. It is so scary how politicized our country has become. And the notion that now the blue slips are going to be gone, it was on our list where, there's really no vetting. So now it's just going to be on party line. Well, it used to be that the senators in the particular state would have to sign off. It was just another vetting process.
And the idea being you could have a Democrat and a Republican from one state. They both would bless, and more often than not, regardless of what party they came from, if they thought it was a competent judge, they'd go along with it. That process is always going out the window. The 60-vote majority, that went out. The nuclear option came in, it became pure majority.
For democracy? Was you telling me that an individual senator, one of 100, should be able to block a vote on an appointment?
No, but
That's
again,
good?
If you take that on a literal sense, yes. But from a practical sense, that almost never happened.
Well, no, but it created a discussion. It created a discussion that was put out there, and so people, could listen to it. The notion that we're now going to get judges who are just approved because we have a couple more Republicans and Democrats who don't care about their qualifications is...
The reason this subject came up in part was you have a Republican, very conservative Republican, Chuck Grassley, who heads of the Judiciary Committee, who said back to sender. He told the president, you can't put these people, as right-wing as they are, you can't put these people on the bench because they're not qualified. Not across the board. There was a few, as we mentioned, one that went through today that I don't think merits the robe.
Don't be surprised by Republicans showing a distance between themselves and Trump right now. The ship is
By the way,
listing.
this reticence has been happening for months, but yes.
Not enough distance to reject this guy. It's not enough distance.
Listen, I'm not defending Chuck Grassley. I'm saying that the notion that Republican senators are going to start splitting from Trump is you're going to see more of it, and you're going to see more of it more quickly.
I never, maybe it's your guys' world, I just visited, but the American Bar Association, sure, I'm sure there's always been political motivations attached to it, but not to the point where it's a standard for at least a layperson that we say, okay, seal of approval.
Right.
When the ABA says not qualified, you would think there'd be a minimum threshold given the significance of the job. It's not like appointing an ambassador to Bora Bora or something. Okay, we're talking about... I like that job. You're right, not a bad gig. But to me, this is a lifetime appointment. You would think there's a minimum threshold. Look, Judge Scalia, I didn't agree with a lot of the rulings, but he was a brilliant jurist, right? And you can say that about just about everybody on the bench. My point is, it seems like we're getting into a new territory here.
Yeah, and my understanding is that the ABA, it's unusual for them to rate someone unqualified. So that in and of itself, even if we don't just always have that standard, they should take an extra hard look at that person because there's a reason. I mean, the ABA is a huge organization made up of people of all different, political beliefs, and so it's to take politics out of it and to look at sort of some basic standards, as you say. And I agree. I mean, a federal judge, I've been in front of judges that I agree with, I disagree with their rulings. They're appointed by a Republican or a Democrat, but, I won't say never, but almost all of them, I respected them as individuals and their thought process and how they got there. To take that sort of standard out of it is, it's sad.
Again, it's look at history. I give you Harold Carswell and Clement Haynesworth, two appointments made by Richard Nixon.
You show off. Go ahead. Yeah.
You made those up.
No, I didn't. One of whom, Carswell, was rated as unqualified, and the Senate turned him down eventually. The issue isn't just the appointment process. The issue is the ratification and the nomination and confirmation process, which is also sort of in the slipping down. But we may have hit bottom here. I'm of the view that Republican senators who want to get reelected, even in relatively safe states, are going to have to show a little bit of distance, and it's going to appear in the confirmation process.
And I'll bring this full circle to the top of the show when we talk about Judge Moore, and in part where he became nationally renowned was he wouldn't recognize federal law, and he was removed from the bench not once but twice for that. You have judges now that are slated for confirmation who think that gay marriage or even recognizing homosexuals as equal citizens isn't something they can agree with, and somehow that in this new world can reach the threshold. Anyway, coming up next, corruption trial of Joe Percoco. It starts in federal court next month. The top Cuomo aide and close to the Cuomo family. Is the governor sweating it out? Does he have reason to be? We'll talk about that after this. Next on the docket, the corruption trial of Joe Percoco. It's starting next month in Lower Manhattan. Percoco, if you may remember, top aide to Governor Cuomo, and he was so close to the late Mario M. Cuomo, he was dubbed his third son. Now he's accused of accepting more than $300,000 worth of bribes from companies seeking state contracts. One of them, a developer who got several large state-funded economic development projects. The other, an energy company that wanted to build a power plant in the Hudson Valley. Prosecutors say the company paid the money to Percoco's wife, Lisa Toscano Percoco, and the cash considered payment for her quote-unquote consulting. That gig below is called a low-show job. Now, the governor is saying that he doesn't expect to testify, but people are wondering how this will impact him. By the way, Percoco has pled innocent. And also, by the way, the governor is up for re-election come November, and maybe with aspirations beyond that for 2020. Richard, how concerned should the governor be?
Well, it depends what the truth is. And we're in a trial where someone is entitled to a presumption of innocence. The government has made a charge.
Thank you for that.
Because no one knows.
Well, explain this much. You've seen how immunity deals have worked. You've seen what kind of arrangements have worked. The wife has not been charged to this point, but the husband has, even though she's the one alleged to have committed the crime. My question is, how the prosecutors are choosing to handle this so far. It looks, at least from the outside, that they may be looking to squeeze Prococo to go up.
That would not surprise me. You people always do that. The difference in this case and other cases is they were questions of law. The Shelley Silver case, the Menendez case. In the end, this is a question of proof. If he did what he's accused of doing, he's guilty. There's no real explanation out.
But real short, though, as a player, Prococo was almost always seen shoulder to shoulder with the current governor, Cuomo, let alone his 30-year relationship.
This is not good for the governor, whatever comes out of it, and whatever truths are eventually come.
How this is being handled right now, you agree with Richard? I mean, we'll see how this plays out here, but they certainly seem to have got their ducks in a row before they brought the charges that they did against Prococo.
True, but in terms of him...
And you agree with Richard also, it's not going to be one of these cases where we try and define, what corruption is. I'm still at a loss to get a definition no one can still explain to me.
By now they've got the jury charge down, so I think that they'll conform their proof to that, but he's going to trial next week, so he hasn't flipped yet. So it sounds to me like he's going forward. The fact that they have not charged his wife yet, I don't know, I mean... Either you charge her or you don't. And they haven't charged her up until now. They're completely prepped for trial. They have all of their evidence. So I don't know how much pressure you can put on them. But remember, in federal court, you can get convicted, you can get sentenced, and you can cooperate for up to a year after that and pretty much get the same effect.
Joe's a very tough bird. There are other defendants who are viewed as less tough. And there is part of the dance in this thing is that the question of cooperation, plea deals and all that is not just a question for Mr. Prococo.
Well, another question unrelated to the Prococo probe, but still a headache for the governor. The FBI probing the Cuomo administration's hiring and payroll practices. The feds are investigating the practice of hiring people for the governor's office, but paying them through different agencies. Feds are subpoenaing documents. Cuomo's spokesperson says they're cooperating. The probe is, quote-unquote, absurd. I know what they're saying. Is this penny ante or is this substantive?
It's gone on for decades. Whether it violates a law surprised me. It's an unsound practice. It's phony. And when they're dealing with authorities as opposed to state agencies, the MTA, for example, versus the Department of Transportation, there is a distinction worth making. On the other hand, there's got to be something else going on here. It does not strike me as a particularly deeply, as something worthy of a deep criminal investigation. But again, you people know more than I do.
And by the way, I mean, for him to admit that people know more than him is a minor miracle in itself. But we are in the holiday season. Interesting. All right, guys. Thank you all very much. It's been fun to say. Happy holidays to everybody. When we come back, everyone, we're going to take a look at some local headlines. So please, stick around. In our Valley headlines, they're back to normal in Plattekill today. That a day after a suspicious package forced the evacuation of the post office and the lockdown of an elementary school. Now, after an investigation, police determined the package was, in fact, no threat. And a Kingston man has been charged with second-degree murder. He's been deemed fit to stand trial. Police say that Seth Lyons killed another man last month and left the body by the train tracks in Midtown Kingston. After a psychiatric evaluation, the judge determined Lyons is able to understand the charges against him and is competent to stand trial. Now, Rhinebeck, they would like to install an electric vehicle charging station at the municipal lot at the Thompson Park. It's also trying to get a state grant to pick up the cost for it. Station costs about $12,000, and the goal is to have that grant also pay for 2 years of usage. After that, people could pay using a credit card right at the machine. And before we leave you, a programming note. Tomorrow, as many may know, is a very somber day. It's the 5th anniversary of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. And we're going to dedicate a good portion of our program remembering that day. We spoke with parents of one of the 21st graders who were murdered on that horrific day. And we also sat down with the director of an acclaimed and very powerful new documentary called Newtown. Again, that's coming up tomorrow at 6 p.m. Till then, have a good night, and we'll see you Thursday.